Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, to this webinar by the Initiative on Cities at Boston University. My name is Loretta Lees. I'm the director of the Initiative on Cities, and I'm just going to do a little bit of introductions before we start. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome Dr. Pinar Çobanyilmaz, who is an urban planner with a PhD from the Middle East Technical University. And her PhD thesis was on urban movements related to the reproduction of urban space, and she looked at some cases in Istanbul. Pinar's research looks at the complex layers of urbanization through the lenses of capital accumulation processes, state-capital relations, and right to the city. So you can tell the kind of connection to me. But what she's done this past year is she's been visiting with us at the Initiative on Cities as a Fulbright scholar, and she spent the past year looking at developing a new framework through which to look at wildfires in Turkey, which she's going to talk about today, where she's connecting some of the planetary urbanization literature from urban studies to some of the kind of more environmentally kind of focused literature on wildfires. So just very quickly, after Pinar talks for about 25-30 minutes, we have three discussants who I'm going to quickly introduce now. So first of all, we have Dr. David Demeritt in the room, who is an environmental geographer. He's also a professor in the Earth and Environment Department at Boston University. He's also a wildfire expert. He co-directs the Leverhulme Center for Wildfires, Environment and Society. We have Dr. Serap Kayasu in the room, an urban economic geographer, a lot of geographers here, who's also a professor of city and regional planning at Middle East Technical University. She's also an expert not only on gentrification, my topic, but also on community resilience, and she was also Pinar's PhD supervisor. And last but not least, we have Dr. Mustafa Kemal Bayirbag, an urban political scientist and professor of political science and public administration, also at Middle East Technical University. And his connection to this very much is his work on the geopolitics of urbanization. So an amazing panel. So I'm going to turn it over now to Pinar, who's going to talk for 25 to 30 minutes. And then we're going to have 8 to 10 minutes of discussion from David, Serap and Mustafa. So over to you, Pinar.
Thank you, Loretta, for giving me the floor. First, I need to share my screen, I guess. So give me a second, please. Yes. Is it okay for everybody? Yeah, okay. Then I can start. Welcome everyone. As you know, my talk is about wildfires mainly, but I'm trying to understand it, I'm trying to comprehend it within urbanization processes. So today I'm gonna just elaborate my perspective and my conceptual framework in relation to wildfires and urbanization processes. Actually, I need to say that it's an ongoing study, not a completed one. In this sense, today I just try to give some hints about my approach. So I would like to first start with some fundamental facts about wildfires. As you know, wildfires are ordinary natural processes that regenerate ecosystems. However, due to increasing impacts of climate change on human systems and natural systems, wildfire regimes have altered and evolved into disasters. And in the last 20 years, the frequency and severity of these fires increased extremely. And unfortunately, the estimates show that these extreme wildfires will continue to increase in the future as well. So at that point, it is important to clarify a common misconception. When we think of wildfires, climate change is the first thing that comes to our mind. However, climate change is not the main cause of wildfires, not the main driving force on its own. Actually, nearly 90% of wildfires are human-induced, and it means that climate change just amplifies the severity and expansion of fires. But human activities like agriculture and energy plants, mining activities, and mainly urban expansions constitute the main drivers of wildfires. To broaden our scope towards deforestation and its relation to wildfires, actually any human activity contributing to deforestation also poses a potential risk for the wildfires, occurrence of wildfires. And it means that change in land cover and land use patterns towards deforestation transform the landscape into a fire-prone environment because of changing fuel structure. And here human activities once again come to the forefront in the sense, according to me, focusing on human activities like urbanization is more valuable to focusing on the effects of climate change. Maybe thinking both of them together is important. And all this technical and relational stuff about the nature of wildfires, I would like to address these wildfires in the context of urbanization and want to come to the main focus of this presentation. Here actually there are two questions that should be interrogated. One is why should we tackle wildfires from an urbanization perspective, and the other one is where is urbanization in wildfire dynamics. Actually here we can refer to two types of interrelation between urbanization and wildfires. In the first one, the urban is considered as an affected object, and here the focus is defining some mitigation strategies to reduce the impacts of wildfires. In the second one, the urban is considered as an influencing subject, and according to me this is more crucial because this perspective covers a broader dynamic to figure out the root causes of wildfires. But this time, the critical issue becomes to your ideology to comprehend the urbanization processes. In many studies focusing on deforestation and wildfires, urbanization is considered as a separate category alongside human activities like agriculture and extractive activities. However, urbanization encompasses all of them as an underlying process that's shaping the entire narrative. So actually I'm gonna get to this point when I'm elaborating my urbanization ideology, but your urbanization ideology is so critical here. Before moving to ideology, I would like to mention the aim of this study. Here I'm gonna outline my thought process because for this study, the aim in the beginning and during the ongoing study, process shifted in another way. So I would like to explain what was my initial aim at the beginning of the study and how it gradually evolved into an different approach. I would like to explain this, and this narrative is important to reveal a radical shift in my perspective over the course of the study. When I first started to this research, my proposal was mainly grounded on post-disaster recovery and the concept of resilient human settlements. And I would have focused on 2021 wildfires, which is the most severe and influencing wildfires in Turkey. And I decided to focus on forest villages because they are the most vulnerable and the least developed settlements in Turkey, human settlement system. And from that point of view, my aim was to develop a management framework for the post-disaster recovery of forest villages affected the wildfires in Turkey. But during the time, and also Muğla is my case, would have my case study, and I would tackle the issue with a mixed methodology. However, during the time, I experienced some critical breaking points that reshaped my understanding of the interaction between human settlements and wildfires. The first breaking point for me was the preliminary field research. I visited forest villages in Muğla before coming here, and I conducted some interviews with local people and engineers from the relevant institutions. I tried to understand the effects of 2021 wildfires on the forest ecosystems and also for these forest villages. But through these encounters, local people consistently emphasized the role of productive practices in protecting forest ecosystems. And they also highlight some problems, the population problems they faced with, and its importance as a risk factor that makes forests more vulnerable to the wildfires. And after these interviews, actually my thinking process radically shifted. And the second breaking point emerged during the 2025 wildfires in Turkey, which is occurred last summer. Throughout this period, public and academic debates intensified around the relationship between urbanization patterns and wildfires. Many scholars discussed the role of the state and their influencing role about the appropriation of natural lands and wildfires from a political ecology perspective. And all these debates were explicitly articulating the core problem, according to me, at least for Turkey case. And the third breaking point was about the gap in the literature. Within the framework, when I'm reviewing the literature, actually I realized that within the framework of wildfire-human settlement interaction, most of research focuses on wildland and urban interface. Although this body of literature is useful for defining some planning tools, instruments, and also defining some mitigation strategies, it is not capable to answer the Turkey's problems, mainly core problems. So all these breakings reshaped my approach both ontologically and also epistemologically. And after that time, exploring root causes of ecological degradation and their relationship with wildfires and defining prevention strategies more than recovery strategies became more important for me. And after all these breakings, the aim altered into another direction, and the revised aim evolved into a critical conceptualization of urbanization dynamics, and it is a way of appropriation of the nature to look at the effects on rural settlements and wildfires, all these processes. And eventually, the goal is to propose a rural development framework considering sustainable relationship between rural communities and forests to minimize the occurrence and impacts of wildfires. And when we come to my urbanization ideology, actually, since my PhD studies, my ideology to comprehend urbanization has rested on the relationship between growth and expansion-driven capitalism and urbanization. So, in this sense, in this ideology, urbanization is not a mayor-built environment or not a container of including some activities. Rather, it should be understood as a socio-spatial process under capitalist relations of production and capital accumulation, and also circulation regimes along with some abstract power relations in resource management particularly. And this is the urbanization ideology, but at the same time for this study also its relation to the nature, such an urbanization ideology's relation with the nature is so crucial. And when we look at the relationship between urbanization and the nature through this ideology, the nature becomes an occupied land and appropriated raw material for particularly production of built environment. And also it is exploited for energy circuits to supply urbanized social metabolisms. and also it is an asset which is commodified through property relations and extractive activities for capital accumulation at the same time. And all these things, urbanization ideology and its relation to the nature, defines my understanding about the urbanization processes. And actually, this ideology perfectly matches with the planetary urbanization and its conceptual framework, because planetary urbanization offers an in-depth insights to relate urban with the nature. And when we ask what is the concept of planetary urbanization, actually it is a critical urban epistemology which is redefine the urban and urban processes redefine it ontologically. And it mainly argues urbanization within interconnected absolute and abstract urban spaces, by emphasizing the extension of traditional urban fabric towards peripheries, rural areas, and natural lands. And it defines a rescaled state and also restructured geographies of power that enable capital accumulations. And lastly, it points out some fragmented socio-spaces with different appearances in built environment and land use patterns, and also some different appropriation and management processes from country to country, maybe scales to scale. And also it come up with some again fragmented social and natural outcomes. So of course, there are some critical voices against planetary urbanization. Actually, I don't want to go into detail about them, but at the end of the day, they mainly highlight the requirement for more empirical studies from different localities and scales to verify this abstract conceptual framework. And I believe that this study exactly tries to do this. To go into detail with an empirical study. And here I would like to explain how I link planetary urbanization with rural decline in parentheses and wildfires. This is my thought process, complex and with blood, sweat and tears, but this is the end product that shows the relation between the planetary urbanization and rural and the forests. Here actually the narrative on planetary urbanization tells us two interrelated patterns. One is implosions and the other one is explosions. Implosions occur in traditional urban fabric with its own dynamics. But here the point is restructured processes generate an escalated urban social metabolism. Here the social metabolism means consumption-based urban societies and their needs that use the environment and the nature. And all this urban social metabolism actually stimulates also explosions. And explosions appear as the extension of implosions towards urban periphery, natural lands, and rural areas. And it is the main focus of this study actually. This process also has its own intervention mechanisms to realize some operational landscapes by occupying natural lands and rural areas, for supplying the needs of this social metabolism, but also at the same time to supply the needs of capital flows. And all this come up with territorialization of rural and nature through complex power relations, struggles and conflicts. And the effects of all this dialectical relation on rural and nature emerge in the form of rural decline and wildfires. On the rural decline side, it appears as worsened rural living conditions, depopulation and loss of labor force. And on the wildfire side, it emerges in fragmented ecosystems with enclaved urbanized lands, and by imposing a radical change on in land cover and land use patterns with increasing ignition risks. And here another important relation is between the rural and forest lands, because their relation mainly based on relations of production. However, all these urbanization processes mainly disrupt this relation, and disrupted production relations between rural and forests escalates wildfire risks as well. And after all this conceptual framework, actually by using this framework as a lens of this my study, I would like to draw an overall portrait about urbanization experience in Turkey. Actually, the beginning of 2000s for Turkey is a radical shift in both in political context and in the form of state and also urbanization practices. After the early 2000s, market-led overproduction of built environment and came up with the rescaled state institutions in the long run. And during this process, the state became a facilitator for the market while becoming an oppressive authority on the society, particularly in the urbanization processes. And this shift also influenced the urbanization practices, and urbanization became an expansionary attitude, became expansionary urbanism with some adjustable interventions, and by instrumentalizing legislations and institutions through a limitless commodification and by systematically neglecting a public benefit. All this process actually became the main characteristics of current urbanization practices in Turkey. With a particular attention to explosions in Turkey, actually there are four Turkish typologies worthy to discuss. First one is urban sprawl on the periphery, which is appear in as an extension of traditional urban fabric to expand rent-seeking ventures through luxury residential developments. And the second one is attraction nodes, focusing on touristification of coast and valuable land natural areas. And the third one is large-scale transportation and infrastructure networks, which is connecting operational landscapes on the natural lands, and also it aims to facilitate some investments. And the last one is extractivist activities, including mining and renewable energy plants, to supply energy needs of the social metabolism. But at the same time, it is a recent rising trend in Turkey, these extractivist activities, and they are a tool of exploitation of the nature for the market, but at the same time it is a tool of colonization for the state in resource management processes. And all these explosions actually lead to the fragmentation and deterioration of natural lands while giving rise to socio-spatial problems in rural settlements. And when we zoom in on the effects of such an urbanization practices on forest lands, here I would like to give main statistical information. Actually, since the beginning of 2000s, Turkey has lost approximately 10% of its tree cover. And here the main driving force is logging, wildfires, but at the same time, mostly extractive activities, infrastructure development, and also settlement expansion. And interestingly, most of these loss occurred in fire-prone regions such as Muğla, İzmir, and Antalya, but not only as a result of wildfires, and also due to prevailing urbanization practices. When you visit the Global Forest Watch website and zoom into the map, you can clearly see the expansion of mine sites and energy plantations around these provinces. And beyond these drivers of forest land loss, also it's meaningful to examine the responsible agents by looking at the role of the state and also the forms of forest utilization, particularly in rural areas. As a constitutional mandate, all forest lands are owned by the state in Turkey, and they cannot be privately owned or they cannot be transferred to private entities. The state is responsible for the protection and management of forest lands. Within this legal framework, priority of use forest is given to forest villages, which is a special statute defined in the laws in utilization. Forest villages, in cooperation with the state, have the right to participate in production processes along with protection of forests. They are also responsible to protect the forest ecosystems. So this framework actually defines a form of utilization grounded in use value. However, since the 2010s, a large number of law amendments in specific to forest lands have expanded the forms of forest land utilization in favor of the investors, in favor of the market actually. And these amendments have facilitated the exclusion of land from forest category for profit making and transfer them to private ownership. And on the other side, there are some institutional strategic reports which navigates policy-making processes. And these strategies actually emphasize pro-nature and rural-based protection and development of forest ecosystems and forest lands. But they are just discursively, because when we come to in practice, all these amendments and just discursive strategies result in a restricted use value for rural localities, while granting exceptional rights and based on exchange value for the investors. So here you can see some listed law amendments and their justification and implementation types. And also these are the some strategic reports focusing on forest ecosystems and coming from different sectors, their main arguments and strategies. And after all these amendments and discursive strategies, ultimately these political preferences and policy choices that give priority to capital interests and their exacerbating consequences for rural areas and forest lands make wildfires a political and urban phenomenon, at least for case of Turkey, we can say. And before, actually, I would like to move on the effects of planetary urbanization on rural decline and wildfires in Muğla case. But before it, I would like to show some examples regarding the appearances of planetary urbanization in Muğla. Actually, these patterns are very similar to urbanization processes observed across the rest of the country, but with one key difference. Muğla is a fire-prone region, and its land cover consists of forest ecosystems mainly. So protecting these forest ecosystem is over serious for Muğla, not just for ecologically but also socially and economically, we can say. And based on my general observations from the site visit and related readings, effects of planetary urbanization on rural decline and wildfires in Muğla case can be summarized like that. On the rural decline side, the effects come up with changing administrative structure with reclassification of rural areas as a part of urban. And also it came up with some restrictions on fundamental rural livelihoods. All this process leads insufficient services and social amenities, And particularly in the state-led forestry sector, it leads some low wages and harsh working conditions. According to me, they are deliberate political choices. And all these things at the end of the day results with dispossession and displacement, loss of social capital and labor force in the rural settlements. All these are critical problems come to the forefront on the rural decline side. And when we look at on the wildfire side, the effects became apparent as growing risk under flexible rules and deregulations in favor of the market. And these deregulations change land cover and land use patterns with changing field structure. And particularly, it influenced the relation between rural production and the forestry, and rurals and nature forest relation. It disrupts all of these relations through an exacerbating maintenance of forests and increasing severity of wildfires. So after all, actually, when all is said and done, what is next? The next step is use this framework in empirical research on selected forest villages in Muğla. Up to now, actually, I tried to understand all this conceptual framework in Muğla case, but at an abstract level. And after that time, I would like to question the embedded relationship between planetary urbanization and rural decline, and planetary urbanization and wildfires, but with a particular focus on the relationship between forest and rural decline and wildfires. I think this relation is so crucial, and here understand the effects of rural decline on wildfires, particularly from a relations of production perspective, is so crucial to understand, because to mitigate the wildfire risks in the future. And in this sense, your contributions and feedbacks is so valuable for me for the further stage for this study. And thank you very much for listening to me and for your patience. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pinar. It's been absolutely fascinating seeing the development of your thought and ideas on this really complex stuff. So we're going to turn over to Professor David Demeritt for 8 to 10 minutes, David.
So I promise not to rabbit on for 8 to 10 minutes. Please cut me off after 5 if I continue to jabber on. So I wanted to say a little bit about the kind of planetary urbanization framework. It's not one that I'm especially familiar with, but it seems to me that it has some value in a couple of ways. Let's try to draw out a little bit. So first, it takes us beyond the kind of the technical focus on fuel loads and kind of fire weather, the physical processes of wildfire risk. That's important. Of course, planetary urbanism isn't the only way to get there. In the United States, over the last 25 years, there's an increasing recognition of the problem of what's called the WUI, that is the wildland-urban interface. These kind of like low-density ex-urban areas that make up like about 10% of the surface area of the continental United States, but is where it's been the most rapidly changing land use type in the United States over the last 30 years. It's where the bulk of new housing goes. It's where all the big fires and all the losses are concentrated. So, and there's a recognition, literally in American regulation, we have statutory definitions for the wildland urban interface. So it's recognized that kind of unconstrained development is a problem, that wildfire disaster risk isn't simply about climate and environment. It's also about land use and economics and social process. And that is a welcome recognition. And planetary urbanism kind of builds on that in some helpful ways, maybe by helping to explain about why we have WUI development and why kind of what happens at the edge of urban regions doesn't just stay there and is connected to other processes elsewhere. So I think that kind of maybe the planetary urbanism focus and its interest in kind of connection with the rural is particularly helpful in a Mediterranean context, where I think the dynamics of wildfire risk are a bit different than in the Western United States, which by virtue only of insured losses kind of tends to dominate thinking about this. So in the US, the problem is really one of sprawl and low density development. I've got a colleague here at BU called Yin Suing. He's done a bunch of econometric modeling, and he estimates that for each additional house built in a low density area of the Western United States, without any regulation, you are looking at an 80% relative increase in the risk that cell, he does this on a kind of like fairly fine resolution. I think it's like 1.2 kilometers squared, 80% chance increase in the relative risk that cell is going to burn because of the extra development. But that's not really what's going on in the Mediterranean so much. It's not about kind of like sprawl, putting more assets at risk and creating more ignition out in the bush. It's about rural development. It's about the kind of the implosion of rural populations, the loss of agropastoral traditions that kind of kept the shrubbery in check, and rising fuel loads. So the kind of dynamics are different here. There's a much closer connection to kind of rural depopulation, maybe. In some ways, I think it's fair to say that Turkey is on the same journey as many other Mediterranean countries: Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece. And thus the kind of Pinar's typology looks relatively familiar from that kind of Mediterranean perspective. You have this implosion of rural population. You also have, I'm kind of trying to remember what you call them now, the kind of attraction nodes of, kind of kind of coastal rural development, a bit of urban sprawl, the kind of the shrinkage of the rural, that's all kind of similar. I think points 3 and 4 maybe are where we have a bit of difference. But there are some important differences maybe, and not just about like relative development levels, but actually about the basic structure of the political economy. So in Turkey, there is no common agricultural policy to kind of buffer the shrinkage of rural marginal areas, which is happening fast in the rest of the European Union, but will be happening even faster without the cap. The second difference, so maybe that means that kind of the shrinkage in Turkey is likely to proceed even more rapidly. Second, maybe important difference here is that the Turkish state owns all of the forest land. And so the kind of property relations are fundamentally different. As I very crudely understand it, like the government may own the land, but that hasn't stopped all sorts of kind of multi-scalar sort of local forms of land use control and regulation among the villagers. But now we don't have those villagers. They are moving off to the cities, or they're just getting old. I'm too old to chase after my goats and have my goats and sheep kind of like trim the hedges for us. And that is a fundamental change. The Turkish state has relied on a fair old healthy bit of clientism, but it's not clear to me that like well-connected people who think they're going to get rich from forest concessions, maybe you can cut the trees once, but that is not a sustainable enterprise without rural populations around, both to kind of do the labor of cutting the trees, but also to fight the fires and chase after the livestock that will keep fuel loads down and allow the forest to reproduce. That is a kind of important difference. It's not clear to me that that sort of clientist development strategy is terribly sustainable, and that in fact maybe forestry and these forest concessions in Turkey is going to look a bit like mining. You strip the forest once and then it is not going to come back. We'll see about that. But what the planetary urbanism framework helpfully does is it calls our attention to the connections between the urban and the rural, and the kind of the political economic ties tying them together that in some ways make the Turkish situation has a, it's not just the ecology that's not all that different than Greece. So too are some of the social processes are similar, but in some other ways they are quite different. No cap, more kind of state clientism. Government owns all the forest land, and that maybe makes the Turkish story different. And exactly how and with what implications, I look forward to hearing more as a kind of empirical elements of the project develop further.
That's great. Thank you, David. So now we're going to turn to Dr. Serap Kayasu, probably pronounced very badly, so please correct me.
You are really good. I mean, it's not that bad at all. Very close to original pronunciation. So thank you. Actually, I would like to start by thanking Pinar again, because as Loretta said, this was a very complex, in fact, layered and well-prepared presentation on the topic. I enjoyed listening to Pinar as always. She always challenges me with her original thinking. And again, this time was no different from our previous interactions. What I will do probably is that I will start by a few of her points, just to give my perspective on the interaction between urban and rural, in order for us to conceptualize the future for rural, maybe from that perspective. And I will finish by both commenting and asking some questions, and 7 of them. Please do not think that this is a reference to Brenner and Smith's article indicating 7 aspects of planetary urbanization. It's just by coincidence that I came up with this 7. So let me start by saying that, in fact, the critics of Brenner and Smith, apparently, they are really strong on their viewpoint regarding to, as I understanding, rural is not as an outside to the urban world, yet to me, it is more complementary than ever in the second decade of the 21st century. So that's how I read the critique of Brenner and Smith's work, as I do appreciate their work extending Lefebvre's thesis on complete urbanization. And they keep telling that they did not mean only to dwell on the urban either. So we all agree on that, apparently. But recently, I have been thinking, mind you, we have been working on planetary urbanization in a master's studio starting from this last September. So I have been thinking that all this contemporary discussion on industrial and urban degrowth and the new potentials for the rural, maybe a regeneration of the rural, do they coincide, or will they ever coincide at all or not? Now, these are my thoughts, actually. So let me start commenting and asking my questions to Pinar. Actually, my first question regards to the future of capitalism, if you like, because last week, we listened to so much discussion, so many people in the World Economic Forum, obviously, a lot of CEOs, significant CEOs, and they did mention that capitalism has done injustice for the middle classes of the global north. Even now, I mean, we are just now openly talking about the white collar workers of the global north. and they're being threatened by the way in which capitalism carried out in the global north as well. So I was wondering if Pinar would like to comment on, can be in the global south, can be in the global north, doesn't matter, about variegated forms of different dynamics between disasters, climate change, capitalism, the dynamics between these three, and does she think any hope is there? Can we expect anything new now that we are in the 21st century and the institutional framework is dissolving, sort of? So does she think that decision makers' view will change anything at all? So I know her answer, probably I can guess, but I'd like for her to say a little bit on that. Do we have a hope now for the future, either in the north or in the south, doesn't matter. So, and the second question is, with reference to variegated forms of capitalism in different parts of the world, does she think that innovation, particularly AI, will make any difference in this maybe regeneration of the rural? I don't know how to call it, but the reinvention of the rural, let's say, how this AI and new technologies and innovation maybe, will they make any difference for the rural in the next decades, let's say? And my third question is, which is very difficult to conceptualize for me, but apparently there is this complex relation between deforestation and agriculture, loss of agriculture, and the processes of deforestation. Do you think, Pinar, that the rural decline will, or maybe incline, rural regeneration will have again, say in this, that the agriculture we've experienced during COVID pandemic, that we need food, and we need food produced at a location very close to where we live. So can we say anything about this agricultural production part of it? So far it's been AI, the future of capitalism, future of agriculture, so on. I'm just, not very keen on Pinar responding these things, but I'm sure she has thought about those. And for extraction of resources, I was going to ask that, does she, and that's something like David maybe touched upon a little bit, does she think that in those areas where extracting resources are more important, or the state policies are more harsh, does she think that these processes will be experienced in a harsher way? So there will be differences between these areas. Sixth, the role of local state, I was going to say, I think I will withdraw that one. She touched upon the state policies aspect, and I will leave that to Mustafa, probably. And the seventh question, for planners, I think it's kind of significant to translate all these insights into concrete strategies, and particularly the strategies of collective action, which has proved to be more difficult than anything else, really. Does she think that there is hope for this in the future as well? Thank you so very much. Well done, Pinar. Thank you.
So now we're going to hear responses, questions from Mustafa Bayirbag. And again, please correct my pronunciation, which I know is awful.
We are more than happy to be here with you. We shouldn't care about the pronunciations, Pronunciations are what we hear from the outside, but what we feel inside is something different, right? So what matters is the sincere commitments and friendship. That matters most. But may I am I allowed to screen share? I would like to share a screen and want to show you
Yes.
something.
Pinar, do you want to take your presentation down?
I took a, well, actually, I drew something as I was listening to Pinar, and I prepared a chart, and I just sent it to WhatsApp to Pinar. Pinar, can you, like, I tried to download it to my own computer, but I failed to do so. I just want to show you first a visual, and then I want to share with you myself a chart.
Could you
For
give me a minute, please?
Are you
Because
emailing it to me, or can you just screen share it?
yeah, I will make a screen share, but first I need to open my WhatsApp
Okay.
app.
Okay. So
So
basically, my commentary will be revolving around first the question of where we locate the state and public policy processes to better understand and contextualize this particular study. And number two is rather about like methodological set of questions, which is about where we draw basically boundaries between the object of analysis and the context. Where do we cut it off? Like we speak of a metabolism, but where does the metabolism start and where does it end? Right? So I'm a metabolic entity. So my boundaries are clear and visible. This is where I end, basically. Physically, this is where I end, right? So, and you can identify me as an object of analysis as a metabolism. Or I can show you a plant, and the same applies to a plant, right? We can identify the boundaries here. But then I breathe in this ecology, and I live here, I eat here, then I give back to the environment, right? So I can be separated from my own environment, but I can also be seen functioning as part of that environment.
hocam, this one, right?
Yes.
And
Uh,
there is one more, I think.
yes. So, and here's the thing is, how do we again separate, differentiate the object of analysis? Let me start with the methodological ones. How do we separate the object of analysis from its own broader context? So that's the first question. So where does the metabolism we call the rural land or the rural areas of Muğla ends? So where does it end? So how do I show it on the map? Right? This boundary drawing exercise is a methodological, has direct methodological implications, right? Long story short, but this is the first point that kind of caught my attention. Number two, again, is about how the notion of urban is treated. Is it urban as an affected object, or urban as an influencing subject, or as a third category, urban itself as a process? And this is right, Neil Brenner's thinking about the planetary urbanization, the urban as a process, or the urban process. Here, the urban is not an object, it's not a subject, but it's a process. It's a pattern of relations and relationships amongst between the settlements, but also across different scales of governance, right? Although he doesn't elaborate much on, well, in an interesting way, although his earlier works are about revolving around the notion of state, in planetary urbanization, state just disappears. And this was interesting. I find it very surprising. Like there's a much to do there on, and it's a very kind of a rich area of study, potentially. I mean, perhaps I mean we. I mean, by the way, I'm also one of the founding members of Muğla Planning Agency, and just yesterday I came from Muğla from a meeting against to protect the rural areas and villages that were under urgent expropriation by the government so that they can be given to the coal mining companies and energy companies. I just came from there, and I know exactly what's going on there. I mean, in terms of the how this metabolism is attacked and the role of public policies there. That's why I would like to bring first the public policies. I mean, to better establish the relationship between the object of analysis and the context. I mean, looking at public policies might be a good idea. This is the first thing that I would like to suggest. And number two, it might be a better idea. Of course, we talk about the planetary urbanism, but I mean, there's still a need to identify what a rural settlement is like, right? Because we start with the urban settlements, sorry, rural settlements, right? So we start with, I think the object of analysis should be a rural settlement, or however you call it, but a settlement that we would call otherwise rural, but a settlement. And number two, then how that rural settlement is embedded into an urbanized region, because Muğla is an urbanized region, right? So the categories of like rural settlement, urbanized regions are two meso levels of or categories, concepts of analysis that might be of help. And can you expand a bit or enlarge the picture, Pinar? Is it possible?
This picture.
Yeah. Okay, here's the thing. Okay, you have shown this triad, right? The planetary urbanization, rural decline, and wildfires as three different processes or events, occurrences, and you show the arrows going both directions, right? So I thought like how I would fill in, how I would define or describe those arrows. What's going on those arrows throughout them? One of them is, well, the first two arrows, upper ones, are about really the root causes of wildfires, right? Right? Either directly triggering wildfires or creating rural decline and then leading to wildfires, right? This is where the root causes of wildfires can be located. But then you talked about mitigation, right? If you identify root causes, you can talk about mitigation for policy purposes. But then recovery is where you discuss rural decline and wildfires and how things are unfolding. And in the midst of all these are quote unquote public policies. Speaking of public policies, meaning what the public authorities are actually doing. So I think here what we need, well, you have already done a bit of work there, right? By locating the legal changes, regulations, and so on and so forth. But I think those public policies can be further refined. Can you now, Pinar, share the other visual that I sent to you?
Yes, of course.
So, like, I'm gonna show you how we can theorize what's in the middle.
Yeah, I'm trying just a minute. Yes.
Thank you, Pinar. This was beyond the expectation.
Yes, I achieved.
Okay, here it is. This is what I'm teaching in my public policy courses. It's from the textbook that like a chapter that I prepared. Oh, this is basically, well, I departed from Jessop and Brenner's framework, conceptual of state rescaling, basically. This is Jessop read through the lenses of Neil Brenner. And here is, for every single issue, apparently we need to map the policies, right? Speaking of policies, who is doing what in the public policy process, right? So we have public entities, civil society, markets, but then intermediary entities between, and at different scales of analysis. So for the wildfires, I would create a policy map like that. But it's not enough to create such a broader policy map. I would now create 4 different charts like this with 4 different layers of analysis. So layer number 1, and how I came up with those layers, well, those layers are about connectivities because planetary urbanization is about connectivities. What makes it planetary are those connections. And there are 4 types of connectivities in Muğla. Number 1 is extractivism, extractivist activities. All those mining companies, mostly Canadian or European, right? And I came from that kind of an legal case and social mobilization, civil society mobilization from that case, their meeting yesterday, right? Second one is export-import relations, and Muğla is a major olive oil producer, an exporter, increasingly becoming an exporter. Number 3 is labor mobility, and it's still receiving immigration, but some of them are retired people, but immigration ongoing. Number 4 is tourism. This is a tourism sector, is one of the heartlands of Turkey. So through those 4 sectors, and every single one of them are directly affecting rural development and rural areas, and with different type of impact. And there are different policy developments changing those 4 different connectivities. So I would kind of create 4 different layers like this. This is just a suggestion, right? And I would see how they overlap. And I would pick a few declining, at least district or area where those wildfires are a kind of a common occurrence, right? This is just, okay, now we can close the screen sharing. So I'm aware that it kind of turned into kind of editing her work to a certain degree, but because we are like also good friends, so I thought that might be of help. But what I'm trying to say, if you want to establish the relationship between the object of analysis and the context, my suggestion from the public policy perspective is to do policy mapping. And the policy mapping along 4 different types of connectivities, because connectivities are at the heart of planetary urbanization as a conceptual category, and also this is how you can empirically further operationalize this study. I think I'm almost done, and just one more
That's
thing.
good, because I was about to cut you off in 1 minute.
I'm done. Just one thing. Just 2 pieces of information. One of them is Izmir Metropolitan Municipality and their planning agency. They have prepared a fire risk mapping. Apparently, they have used different layers of maps, and somehow they have created like the 1st degree risk, 2nd degree, 3rd degree, so on and so forth. So there's a kind of a now risk map that they prepare. So that might be of help, but here's the question: is how do you measure it? If we speak of risking, that's a separate question, but that's a methodological question. And another one is, in the case of Muğla, another piece of information is that in 2014, Muğla became a regional metropolitan municipality. We didn't have that before. So it's a younger metropolitan municipality. The other ones are like 40 years old. Some of them are almost like 40 years old, but Muğla Metropolitan Municipality is 10 years old as a municipality, right?
Hey, Mustafa, I'm going to have to cut you now,
Yes,
sorry.
and that's it. I'm done.
That was great. I love it when people question conceptualizations and categories. It really gets us thinking. So we're going to go back to Pinar now. So you have, I guess, 10 to 15 minutes to
10 to 15.
respond.
Okay, thank you for your comments and contributions. Actually, they are so valuable for me. First, I would like to answer Serap Hocam's question. Is it okay? Because David, did you have a question? I think no, but your comments are, I get all of them.
You can respond to
and-
his comments. They don't have to be questions.
Yeah, actually,
You could tell me I'm full of garbage, but I was going to use another word in the first instance, but didn't.
So your points are so important for me because, yeah, you highlight the differences between USA case and also Mediterranean countries. Yes, Mediterranean countries, particularly in Turkey, about the forest lands, the property relations totally different and concession types totally different. So considering all these differences within the context dependency is important for me, and actually I try to do this for the Turkey case. So actually you verify my point of view. Thank you very much to touch this. And also Serap Hocam's questions and also comments. Yes, Hocam, actually, I don't know what will the future of capitalism. Anybody knows, I think.
I was kidding, right?
Yeah, no, I know, I
last
know.
week was interesting series of events. So yeah, I mean, your answers are already in your presentation. So I mean, brush through whatever I said. Don't mind it, you know, just short, very short answer will do.
Yeah, and you said rural complementary, not outside the urban. Yeah, actually, planetary urbanization tackles the issue from this point of view, I think. Not an, in an ideal world, yeah, of course, the rural and urban not a dichotomy or not an duality. They are complementary, but it's an ideal world. But through this current urbanization pattern, particularly in Turkey, you know, urban incorporates rural, always grabs it and occupy it, and then at that point, rural cannot be complementary for urban. Uh, but this is an ideal, yeah, point of view actually. And your question about AI innovation and its potential to make difference for rural. Actually, now AI, yeah, affects rural settlements radically, but in not a good way, mainly in a problematical way, because you know AI needs some minerals and some mine activities to survive. So all these things leads extractivist activities. So I try to talk about the relation between extractivist activities, planetary urbanization, and its effects on rural decline. So yes, it definitely makes some differences on the rural settlements, but not in actually good way, I think. Not an innovative way, but to by deepening the problems for the rural settlements. So actually, what was the other question? I'm trying to find my notes. And yeah, of course, AI. I don't think that AI will work as for regeneration of or rural development cannot be work as a in this way. I think I don't think so. It's not an it cannot be an innovative tool for the rural development or rural regeneration. And sorry, when we come to Mustafa Hocam's critics, Hocam, you said urban is a process, not an object and not a subject. Actually, this is when I'm trying to explaining some considerations about urban and wildfire relations. It's not my opinion actually. I'm exactly trying to understand. It's a continuous process actually. This is the how can I say? This is some considerations in the literature. They try to understand urban as an object or subject. Sometimes it's influenced, sometimes it's affected by these wildfires. It's not my perspective actually. We are on the same page at that point. And your public policies, yeah, actually in the further stage of this study, I need to go into deep. So my aim is to unfold these embedded relations. So your comments will be so useful for me. I guess we can talk about them in person when I come to Turkey. So thank you very much for your comments. They give some open my way to think something about go into deeper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pinar. We're going to open it up to the audience now and then get a more general discussion going. Okay, well, the questions. Have we got any questions in the chat?
We do. We have a few, Loretta. If you want, I can read off the first one if Pinar's ready.
I can't see them. Do you want to read them off, Stacey?
Yeah, of course. The first one is, to what extent are wildfires unevenly distributed spatially in Turkey? The question helps reframe wildfires as outcomes of political, economic, and planning decisions rather than isolated natural disasters.
I'm sorry, but I couldn't understand the states. Actually, I couldn't catch the. Sorry, I missed it.
No worries, I'll reread it. And hopefully you can see it
Is
in the
it
Q&A
possible
box.
to copy and paste the question
Yeah.
in the chat box to
Oh, I
check?
can see them now. If you click on Q&A,
Actually,
you
I
should be able to.
cannot.
That's okay. I will share it with you. Give me 1 second, Pinar. Here's the first one, and I'll send the others as you're
Okay.
thinking about this
Thank
first
you.
one. No problem.
Do you want me to read them out, Stacey? Yeah.
Sure, if you can see them now, that's great.
I can now, I couldn't before. So Pinar, to what extent are wildfires unevenly distributed spatially in Turkey? And this is from Yesem, and the question helps reframe wildfires as the outcome of political, economic, and planning decisions rather than isolated natural disasters. So can you just say a bit more about the extent to which wildfires are unevenly distributed spatially in Turkey?
Actually, wildfires in Turkey, Turkey is a country that has different climate patterns. So, particularly west and south coasts mainly expose wildfire risks. So, I cannot say in a statistical way the distribution, but mainly it occurs in the west coast and also the south coast in Turkey. So, oh, there are many questions coming here. And so, um, actually defining an overall policy to mitigate wildfires in planning process or some political and economic process is not possible for Turkey. Actually there are different climate patterns and also different risk patterns in Turkey. So actually this is this is its distribution on spatially, we can say. And the
Do you want me
other
to go to the
one.
next question, Pinar?
Yes, I'm reading now.
Okay, so Andrew has asked, I
About it.
wondered what different stakeholders you're planning to interview. So you've got this conceptual framework now, which I think personally is excellent and really interesting.
Yes.
So what different kind of stakeholders in the next step of this kind of project are you going to interview?
When I first visited the field, actually, I just interviewed with the local people and some engineers from the institutions. But in the next time, I'm planning to uh, uh, interview with some stakeholders if there is. I don't know. Actually, I need some help at that point of Mustafa Hocam, and also opinions of academicians and of course the municipalities is so crucial for the policy making processes, and maybe they have some action plans. I don't know, but actually, the next field visit will clarify all these stakeholders. But for now, I mainly can say, yeah, I need to interview with some NGOs and also academicians and some municipality person maybe. But for now, I cannot say, yeah, exactly who are them.
Do you think, Pinar, you also need to interview people living in these rural settlements?
Yes, of course. They are the prior one for me.
Yeah.
I need to go into detail in these interviews to get their relation with the forest lands and
Yes,
ecosystems.
exactly. Yeah. You've talked about that before. Great. So Elgar says, many thanks for this interesting presentation. I'm also an urban planner, and I feel Pinar had a comprehensive planner perspective. I think a sectoral comparison between policies in close relation to a spatial multi-layer information on case studies could make your claim stronger and more tangible. So a sectoral comparison between policies in close relation to a spatial multi-layer set of information on case studies.
Yeah, actually, Mustafa Hocam said some main sectors in Muğla, and also I tried to cover them in my presentation, like tourism and also mining and renewable energy plans. So these are, I think this should be the some sectors that I need to take into account for further stages. So yeah, and also yeah, I need to relate them with some special appearances at the same time, maybe.
And they had a further question, which I think actually relates to something Mustafa was saying. This notion that cities and rural areas are more of an ecosystem, and this kind of relates to what Mustafa was saying about where does it end? Like, what are the boundaries of what you're actually looking at?
For rural settlements, right?
Well,
And
cities and rural areas.
yeah, actually, defining a certain particular boundary is very difficult because, yeah, all these penetrating into each other, and so there is no clear-cut boundaries for them. But yeah, they are more of an what's saying cities, rural
Ecosystem.
areas are more of an ecosystem themselves. Yes, of course, but now urban ecosystem is much more dominant on the rural ecosystem. So we are actually trying to clarify this. So yeah, there is no a certain boundary between them actually.
Yeah, and I guess planetary urbanization is about the breakdown of that kind of
Yes.
urban-rural dichotomy. David, you had your hand up?
I was just going to say that instead of thinking about wildfire policies as one singular bit of connection, they fall into a bunch of different families. So you'd have like your kind of like fire suppression. Oh, it's on fire, I'm going to put it out. That's likely to be a different kind of constellation of practices. Well, it is a different constellation of practices, but a different constellation of actors and interests than you might have involved, say, in spatial planning, which in a wildfire context might be about, which I presume is like where the new wildfire risk maps are, about like trying to, in a ex ante anticipatory way, keep development out of harm's way. And that might be, again, different still from like fuel load management practices, which historically probably would have been largely localized, small kind of prescribed fires set to improve grazing. But maybe now that if we have fewer and fewer grazers, is going to require the government, because after all, it owns the forest land, to come in and do what the peasants used to do for us without us asking. And conceivably, that's likely to be, again, it's a different set of practices, but also a different set of actors, institutions, and policies. And I'm guessing that those three policy domains in Turkey, like as in so many other jurisdictions, are often quite fragmented and disconnected from one another, because different people are doing different things in different ways without necessarily knowing like what the left hand is doing when I'm the right hand. So that's just a kind of methodological thought.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Serap or Mustafa, do you want to respond to Pinar's responses?
No, actually, something new I was gonna say. Remember, I didn't say anything about this. However, it's very much related to what Pinar said earlier, just now. In fact, rural gentrification, Loretta, it's a thing in Turkey now, particularly to Western coast, and I mean Aegean coast and Mediterranean coast, Western and Southern coasts of Turkey. A lot of urban people are now moving to these rural areas and living rural lifestyles. They're learning again, relearning, yeah, to live rural lifestyles in those areas. So as Pinar was talking, I just remember we did not mention that here in Turkey. Yeah, they're all, I mean, older settlers are leaving. There's no more peasantry agriculture anymore, particularly in the West and South. even in the East maybe as well. But rural gentrification is a thing. So, I mean, that is something that we can think on and work on along with Pınar's researches, and maybe she will talk to those people and she will look into that as well. That's something important for Turkish case. Thank you.
Interesting. So maybe rural gentrification could be a positive actor in this case, which is really
Yes.
quite distinctive in the literature. Mustafa, any points?
Just one last thing, as a follow-up to what Serap said, is well, this means that the way in which Muğla, the province, is connected with the rest of the country and the world is changing, transforming. Now, in fact, just the day before, like it was last Saturday, we had a meeting with the mayor as the agency, and one of the things that are planned is to start the digital nomads project to attract other digital nomads to, and that's a kind of a conscious
Like
strategy.
most of Southern Europe.
Yeah, and to change the pattern of in migration, because normally the population is increasing, but by getting older, because the retired people are moving to the area. Now they want to change the age group, right? And they want to win back the people to agriculture. And this time a new type of a labor force for agricultural production, rural production. So they also want to change that profile, demographic profile too. So what I'm saying is that, and there's a conscious strategy to do so now, but it might be a good idea to have kind of identify the periods of connectivity. How Muğla was connected with the rest of the country and the world, let's say between early 2000s and the mid 2014, and after 2014 when it became a metropolitan municipality, from 2014 to now, right? And from the inception of neoliberalism, like in Turkey, right, from 1980 to 2000, when the AKP started an aggressive neoliberalization project, right? So at least this main focus being the post 2014 era, perhaps, but that sort of a periodization might be of help in identifying the patterns of change and how that connectivity has been evolving. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
That's great, thank you. I mean, one thing that really kind of struck me was when Mustafa mentioned the Canadian companies who were doing the mining extractivism, which introduces this kind of international dimension that I guess complicates or is part of the complexity of the role of the state in Turkey in this. And I was just wondering if the three of you could comment on that.
As far as the Canadian companies extracting gold and other material, yeah, it's the case still. I mean, although the local residents, locals, like rural locals, not new gentrifiers, some of them are kind of young, Mustafa, though. Not all of them old, retired people. Some of them are young, retired people. But, real, genuine rural residents, they've been doing a lot of public protests, a lot of speaking out against those companies and state policies, sometimes with some success, sometimes with not. But as you said, that's still an ongoing issue. And in some new areas, even we come across that, unfortunately. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing that really strikes me is if we can even use this term rural settlement now. Like, what do we mean by rural settlement now in the context where we've got rural gentrifiers and
Right.
what does that even look like? Those traditional notions of how we conceive and conceptualize urban and rural are so different now that so just a couple of comments on that, Pinar.
It needs to be clarified. Actually, I don't know, but for the cases that I investigated, maybe I can define something. But for now, I cannot say anything because I say something, it's so abstract. It will be so abstract for now. But about the rural gentrification, Actually, first I went to the site visit. I realized that different rural typologies in Muğla. Forest villages is one of them, yeah, among these different typologies. But rural gentrification mainly happens in the rural settlements, very near the urbanized centers actually. But like forest villages, they are on the top of the mountains and on the top hilltop, so they are far away from the urban services and urban fabric. So there are different typology, and also there are some another typology about the rural settlements, which is practice some agricultural activities. They are on the plain lands and not so far but not so close to the urban centers. But this is just I'm saying this just by sitting from now, so I don't know. I need to go to the site and observe and get some data about them.
Great. So I'm really looking forward to what happens next, Pinar. We're coming up to 11:30, Serap. Any quick comment?
I was just saying that there are good examples of those rural gentrifiers, urban people moving into rural areas. A lot of creative artists, working group are taking location. For example, in Köyceğiz, Yılmaz Erdoğan, a very famous writer and anyway, whole round artists just settled there. Many creative work processes are going on.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
So we're out of time now. So I just want to very quickly say a massive thank you to Pinar. I thought that was absolutely amazing, very rich, very interesting, very thought-provoking, and also to the responses from three very different experts that I think have been really valuable to Pinar. So thank you so much, and have a good day, as they say.